I welcome you back out here. Has anyone never been out here before? That's like my goal. So I've been a naturalist for a little over a year, and the previous naturalist was here for 30 years. And so my goal has just been trying to introduce new topics and subjects out here and get new people out here. For me, just coming out to the Nature Center is huge, that you know we're here and what we do and what we provide. So if you do have any programs you'd like to see out here, please let me know. I'm always looking for new ideas. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ann Stout and let her introduce herself. I actually worked in Story County, and I worked with her in Story County, and she's a wonderful presenter, so I wanted to bring her here.
Awesome, thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out today. We've got a lovely Saturday to be out here. No winter weather to have to fend off. So today we're going to be diving into soap making, and this is old school soap making, literally from scratch. So I'm really excited to be able to share that with all of you. It's something that I've been doing now. I've been doing soap making for 10 years. I started out actually making lip balm and other body care products before that. And it's something that just piqued my curiosity. Honestly, I took a class like you today, right? 15 years ago, I took a class, and here I am. I should note also, I'm a chemical engineer by training. So I love the science. It's kind of that combination of both. It piqued my curiosity. I've always been artsy, craftsy, do-it-yourselfer, combined with the science. So the soap making process really fuses a very traditional art, a very traditional craft, with modern tools and technology to help us out to be able to make a fabulous soap that's super nourishing, moisturizing for our skin, and we can use all kinds of fabulous essential oils as well to give it aromatherapeutic benefits as well. So it's a super fun process. We're going to go through everything step by step today. Please don't hesitate to ask questions. I love classes to be discussion-based. This is not college lecture. I work at Iowa State for my day job, and I do a lot of education and outreach. This is not college lecture, so ask me questions, because a lot of times that's where we get to the heart of some of the information is, you know, one person is curious about it, and another one's like, well, I was kind of wondering that too. So please holler. Restrooms, out the hall, down the hall, etc. So whenever get up and leave, it's okay. We'll catch you up. It's all good. So what is soap making all about? What ingredients do we need? Got a whole packet of information for you here. So all of your packets are yours to keep and yours to take home. But I've got a ton of information right all over them. You should all have a pen at your spot. So you're welcome to take notes if you wish. Notes for reference if you want to do this at home, because that's really my goal of class. You're going to go home with awesome soap that we make here today. You're each going to go home with a pound of soap. But my goal is that you also have the knowledge, the skills, know how to do it safely. If you want to do this at home yourself, you say, I've got the confidence, I know how to do this safely, I can do this. So if you're not at that comfort level, ask me questions so when we're done, we're all saying, okay, we got this, we can do this. In terms of making the soap, there are really two foundational types of ingredients that we need. We need to have fats of some sort, and we need to have lye. That's it. It's really not complicated, but we'll go into a bunch of numbers and see how we can mix and match different ingredients to really have an all-around very beneficial soap. Do any of you, just out of curiosity, do any of you know generations back in your families, grandmother, great-grandmother, any soap makers in the house? Back generations? Yeah, my grandmother, great-grandmother were. And a lot of times for them, I mean, it was not like what we're doing today, right? We're making it for fun. We're making it because we can make it all natural. We can control what we put in it. They were making it really out of necessity, right? Self-sufficiency. So my grandmother and great-grandmother out on the farm, they would use the lard and the tallow that they had from their animals. And then those were used in the soap. Today, so when I say fats, that's referring to that could be animal fats, any of those things I've just mentioned. So lard, tallow, etc. Or any sort of plant-based oils. So fats includes animal fats as well as oils. There's a ton of different choices to choose from in terms of the oils that go in your soap. So I've got the recipe created for us today, but you'll also know the basics when you go home today. If you want to change that up, if you want to customize the recipe and do that differently, you'll have the know-how to do that as well. Okay, so essentially to make soap, I mentioned we need fats, and then we also need lye. So what is lye? outside of soap making? It's caustic, yeah. So caustic, it's a strong base. It's poison, yes, I'm hearing some important words. So is it dangerous? Absolutely, by itself. So a lot of times where we commonly find it, it's gonna be in, for instance, if you're at the hardware store, it's in the drain cleaner aisle. Lye is a super strong caustic, and a lot of times we find it in those products that eat the junk out of our clogged up sinks. So you can imagine, yes, the power of this caustic, its ability to basically eat away at these things. Its chemical name is sodium hydroxide. The symbol is NaOH, and so sometimes I use these things interchangeably. Stop me if I geek out too much on chemistry stuff, because I get really excited about these things. Okay, so with your lye, you can get this, as I mentioned, hardware stores. What's really important is that, for instance, on the outside of this package, it actually says 100% lye. Some of the drain cleaners will have like color additives, things like that. For soap making, we don't want any of that extra stuff. We just want 100% pure lye. It's in a powdered form, so we will be dissolving it as part of the soap making process, which we'll go into more of those details momentarily. But the basics, you need lye, you need fats, and together in the soap making process, we start mixing, getting those molecules bumping into each other, and that's what forms soap molecules. In the same process, we're also forming glycerin molecules. And glycerin is an awesome humectant. It helps hold the moisture into our skin. And so when we think about the dry conditions, like Midwest destroys us for how many months of the year, right, with the dry conditions, handcrafted soap, that's one of the benefits, is that it can be ultra moisturizing, nourishing, thanks to the glycerin that's in there. And that's formed naturally in the process. So there we go, fats plus lye. Our resulting ingredients will be soap molecules and glycerin molecules in a fabulous soap bar. Those are the basics of the chemistry. We'll be going into a little bit more detail, and we're going to be doing some math here in just a minute, but I wanted to go over a few more of the equipment goods just to follow the order of our handout, try to keep it systematic here. Page 1, I've got a comprehensive list of everything you need. It's all sitting in front of you, so I might snag your groups just to be able to use for show and tell here, and I'll bring them back to you momentarily. But that way, if you're doing this at home, you've got the basics of, what do I need to have? Okay, so when you're making soap, first things first, the materials that you're using, that's important. The materials matter because when you're reacting, basically certain ingredients, when certain ingredients are touching, like the lye, for instance, we want to make sure that they're not going to react adversely with the lye. So stainless steel is your friend. We're going to be mixing up our batch of soap in these stainless steel pots here. They don't have to be super heavy duty. Like you'll see, these are actually quite lightweight. I mean, you can buy very expensive, fancy, like stainless steel stock pots for soup. We don't need the super expensive ones. Lightweight is good because I would very, very, very highly recommend that your equipment is dedicated to soap making, not interchanged with food kitchen use. Okay, so stainless steel stock pot. I've also got a smaller stainless steel container that we'll be using. This is actually where we'll be dissolving the lye. So essentially, our pieces of equipment that are going to be touching the raw lye, those are the ones that especially, we want to have something non-reactive. Stainless steel is good. Glass is also good. Just the precautionary word with glass, like in the kitchen, when we have drastic temperature changes, of course, that can be a challenge with glass, and obviously the fragile nature of it. But glass certainly can be your friend in soap making. You will need an assortment of different measuring cups, etc., for weighing out ingredients. Everything is done by weight. And so even though these are liquid measuring cups with the gradations on the side, we're going to ignore that today. Ignore that altogether. So basically, you just need some, bowls, measuring cups, etc. These can be kitchen. You can interchange those. That's okay. Because this is just going to be really for weighing out our oils, for instance, like our food grade oils. You will also need an assortment of spoons, spatulas, stirring apparatus. Materials matter here too, because again, they're going to be touching that raw soap batter, touching the lye. Okay, so silicone is your friend. Non-reactive, and it also, why is silicone great in the kitchen? Doesn't melt. Yeah, it can stand up to high temperatures. So that's why it's really beneficial for soap making too. So it can stand up to high temperatures, it's non-reactive also. Okay, so different options here. Don't need to spend a ton of money on these. Again, some of these are like Dollar Tree spatulas. So very handy there. Stainless steel, again, is your friend so stainless steel spoons, etc., always good. Other materials, plastic is generally okay, but I would recommend if you're using plastic, make sure that it's a heavy-duty plastic. Lightweight plastic can melt. I learned that from experience. I've learned a lot of these things from experience that like don't do things. So heavy-duty plastic is good. Wood, I would recommend no, because it's porous. So if you think about, that can soak in like the essential oils, the scents, just like it can soak up some food smells in the kitchen. So I generally recommend avoiding wood. Also with your pots and pans too, other metals like aluminum, tin are absolute no's. Those are definite avoids because they would react with the lye. So stainless steel, silicone, generally very good. Glass is good. Other things that you will need. I'm return your goods to you. Thank you. If you're doing this at home, you will also need to have a scale of some sort. I mentioned we're going to be weighing things out. In terms of the scale, so this is going to be clearly a little bit of a cost up front, but it's imperative to, it's one of the benefits, one of the modern tools and technology pieces that we have today, but it's also imperative to make sure that we're making a safe soap, that we're using the right ratio of the oils and the lye. So postal scale or a food scale, like kitchen scales are all over the place now. So the scales are much more accessible than, 10 years ago, for instance. With your scale, you want to make sure that it can weigh out to 1/10 of an ounce. That's the precision that we're looking for here. And scales in the range, you can find these at Target, you can find them at Walmart, like in the office supply section. You can find them on Amazon. What can you not find on Amazon, right? Kitchen scales, et cetera. So there's really, a lot of availability. We're talking probably in the anywhere $25 to $40 range for a scale. Another piece of equipment that I don't have out yet but we'll be using is an immersion blender. How many of you use the immersion or stick blenders in the kitchen? Yeah, so they're awesome in the kitchen for things like soup, right? They're also awesome for soap because they help us do that mixing process. I mentioned that the fats and the lye, we gotta get them those molecules bumping into each other. Well, we're gonna do that through a combination of some manpower or woman power, some nice vigorous stirring combined with the power of the stick blender as well. Both of those are gonna help us out. So it's a little bit of like summon your inner pioneer woman combined with a stick blender to help us out. Okay. Other than that, I think that covers most of our equipment. We'll talk more about soap molds later when we get to the molding process. So questions about equipment, what you need if you're gonna do this at home? The stick blender is not required, but it is very, very handy. I'd recommend it, and I'd recommend using it separate from your kitchen one. I'd also recommend, it's up to you, but some of the stick blenders, there are some that are one piece, and there are a lot of them that come apart. The come apart type are very, very handy for soap making for the cleanup process afterwards. Learned that one from experience too. So I would recommend the type that just detach because then you can throw the bottom part of it, the actual blender part, just throw it in with your dishes, throw it in the dishwasher too. That's my recommendation. Spend just a few dollars more and get the ones that come apart. Okay, so we've got our equipment covered. We're now gonna move on. Get pumped. We're gonna move on to the math section of the program. Okay, so why are we doing math here today? I promise it'll be painless. It's gonna be like group math. We've got calculators and group math, so we can do this. But why are we doing math in the first place? Reason we're gonna be doing a little bit of math here this morning is because with our soap recipe that we're gonna be making, we're actually gonna be doing using a combination of 4 different oils to make our soap. So question for all of you, can you make a soap with 1 oil? With 1 fat? Getting a lot of, I think so, probably. Yeah, you absolutely can. What would be a reason for using multiple oils versus 1? Yeah, like moisture. You can get the benefits of multiple different oils if you use them in combination. Okay, so that gets us to why we're doing math. We've got to run, so each different fat or oil that you use for soap making reacts with lye differently. And how it reacts with lye, it's defined by a saponification number. So saponification is the technical name of the chemical reaction that we're going to be doing. It's the reaction of fats or oils reacting with lye. It would be valuable, so for the next few minutes as we're working on the math, I think it would be very handy in your handouts if you've got page 2 and page 3 out, or at your tables if you want to share so you can see both pages. That would be awesome. Because page 2 is where we're going to run our numbers, but page 3 gives us a chart of saponification numbers for a ton of different fats and oils that you can use in the soap making process. I mean, so as you can see, there's probably, I mean, like what, I don't know, 60 different oils listed there. Obviously varying in cost, widely varying in accessibility. But today for our soap, I mentioned we're using 4 different oils. And I picked those for a couple different reasons. One, I like to pick, so I know it's a very reliable recipe. It's a recipe that gives us a good amount of time for doing it your first time. You don't want a recipe that's gonna move so fast that you're hurriedly, frantically trying to get this all mixed and in the pot, and we've got a crisis on our hands. We're gonna try to avoid that. I also pick these, I like them because they're pretty accessible oils. I don't want you to have to spend a fortune, and this makes a really quality starter soap. So the 4 oils that we're going to be using today include coconut oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil, and cocoa butter. And so what are some of the benefits? Why use each of those? Have any of you used those in, any body care type of thing?
Coconut oil is a smooth delivered.
Yeah, it's really smooth, definitely. So let's just start with the coconut. So coconut oil is smooth. Coconut oil creates awesome lather in your soap. So I use coconut oil in it's the foundation of every single bar of soap that I make. It also helps create a hard soap bar. And to me, a hard soap bar is a long-lasting soap bar, and that's a quality soap bar. I don't want a soft, mushy soap bar. So coconut oil, to me, is like the foundation. It's absolutely used in every bar. Where do you get coconut oil? Yeah, I mean, now it's amazing how many of these oils now we can just get at the grocery store. How many you can find at Walmart, at Target, at Hy-Vee, etc. So, I mean, let's put this in perspective. I found coconut oil at Aldi. It's really accessible. So your coconut oil and all these other oils, you can certainly buy. Like I buy mine online because of the quantities that I'm using, but you can buy them at the grocery store. Absolutely, you don't need to be spending a fortune on these base oils. So all these oils we're talking about right now, the coconut oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil, and cocoa butter, I'm going to be referring to those as our carrier oils. And when I say that, that means that they're the base foundational oils for our soap. They're not adding scent to our soap. They're not adding any fragrance, but they're going to be creating the body of the soap. So coconut oil is our foundation. Up next, soybean oil. That's really great because it's very good conditioning oil. It helps contribute to the hardness when we put it with coconut. So I view those as both good things. Sunflower oil, really, really nourishing. I mean, a lot of times you see olive oil in body care products. Sunflower oil offers many of the same properties at a reduced price, which I like. So we're going to be, I mean, obviously there's some equipment that we're going to be buying, for instance, but sunflower oil offers amazing benefits at, to me, a really reasonable price. So I love that, moisturizing especially with the sunflower oil. And then finally, cocoa butter. Any fans of cocoa butter in body care products? Yeah, it's super luxurious. It's really, I mean, it's a hard texture. So you'll see it at room temperature here. And open it up and show you all. So here's a big chunk of it. It does melt on skin contact though, and it's so silky smooth, luxurious. So in our soap, we're gonna be using it at actually a really small percentage, but it adds really something special. It adds an additional moisturizing benefits, helps to create a barrier to lock the moisture in our skin, also helps contribute to a hard soap bar. So those are some of the reasons we're using the oils that we are today. So each of those oils I mentioned reacts with the lye differently. And that's defined by the saponification numbers on page 3. So we're going to be working through now a few calculations that are going to tell us, okay, we know the oils we're using, how much lye do we need to react with those? So on page 2, top paragraph here, I've got the basics listed for our recipe that we're going to be making today. So we will be working in groups of 3s. Each group is going to be making a 3-pound batch. Everybody goes home with 1 pound. So for the total numbers are listed up here. I would recommend grab your pen and we're going to drop those down into that left-hand box, the numbers for each of our base ingredients for our recipe. So to make a 3-pound batch, 3 pounds, 48 ounces. We're going to be using 18 ounces of coconut oil, so go ahead and write that in that first left-hand box. 15 ounces of soybean oil. 12 ounces of sunflower oil. And 3 ounces of cocoa butter. Okay, so now one at a time, we're gonna look through, I'll assign groups. Your job is to look up the saponification values for these different oils, and then we'll cross-check it across the room. So right over here, your job is coconut oil, soybean oil here, sunflower oil at this table, cocoa butter. All right, your group is off the hook for now. So on page 3, pull your saponification value for that oil. And then that's what I would recommend. That's the next blank line is where you'll write in that saponification value. And then there are a bunch of calculators at each table, or you're welcome to use your phone as well. And we're going to multiply those two numbers together. We've got like the large view ones back here. The calculators are like this big. Okay, so let's take a look. Let's start out with our coconut oil. So we know we're going to be using 18 ounces of coconut oil. My group over here, what did you find for the saponification value for coconut oil from the chart? 0.190, excellent. And so then you multiply those two together. 18 ounces times 0.190 gives us, what's that? 3.42. So I would recommend 3.42. So I'd recommend all of you write that in on that first line. So it was coconut oil, 18 ounces at 0.190 equals 3.42. What does that 3.42 mean? It is ounces. That's the ounces of lye that react with our 18 ounces of coconut oil. So what we're doing in this right-hand box is figuring out how much lye do we need for each of our base oils. So we're good on coconut oil. How about my soybean oil team? 15 ounces. What's the saponification value? 0.134? Okay. 1.35. And then what's our final ounces of lye? 2.025. Sounds good. 2.025. Keep all those decimal places for now. Okay, sunflower oil group. Can you read me your numbers that you got there?
0.134.
Okay, and then the final value?
1.608.
1.608. Sounds good. And then cocoa butter. What are our results there?
0.137.
Okay.
And then our final was 0.411.
0.411. Excellent. So again, this right-hand box, those final numbers, that's the amount of lye that's needed to react with the respective amounts of each of our oils that we're going to use. However, we're not going to weigh out individual little cups of lye for each oil. What we really care about is the total. So this is basically giving us a weighted average based on the amounts that we're using. So go ahead, and now everybody's got the numbers written in that we just read off. Add all of those up, and then drop that into the box right below. And that's going to give us our total amount of lye that we need for the batch.
Shout it out.
Oh, you know you're on deck now. You were off the hook earlier. So right over here, do we have a total value?
I know. Does somebody have it? 0.464. Is that what you got?
Yeah, that's right. No.
7.0. I've got 7.086 back here.
What do you got?
7.464. Okay, we've got some technical difficulties with calculators here. See what our consensus is here.
So you write it up in your head, is that what you do? Okay, how does this work? I gotta have my work calculator.
Any others? 7.464? 7.464, excellent. I'm going to agree with that, yes. Okay, so 7.464 is our total amount of lye that we need to react with 48 ounces of oils for this soap recipe. That's the exact amount of lye that we would need to react with those oils. In your final batch of soap, if you're going to have extra of something, would you prefer having extra lye or extra oils?
Yeah.
Extra oils, yeah. For safety purposes, definitely. And so we've got one more calculation here. Well, actually two, but we're done with the bulk of it. So in terms of our lye, the last thing we're going to do here is multiply that by 0.95. So that's 7.464 times 0.95. Shout it out.
7.0909.
7.0909. Okay. So the reason we multiplied by 0.95 is because what we're doing here is factoring in a 5% buffer. Just to factor in, for instance, okay, we're using different scales, the precision of scales, etc. You know, if we're going to have extra of something, we want to make sure it's extra oils, and so we take a 5% buffer. The other benefit is with having extra oils, we get the moisturizing, nourishing benefits of those oils then coming through in our final soap as well. So the 5% buffer gives us 7.0908 something or other, but our scales can't weigh to that many decimal places. So now you can round, hooray. So our final amount of lye then based on that would be
We rounded up or down?
closest tenth. 7.09 just to one decimal place. So 7.1. Yep. Yep, exactly. So that's the actual amount of lye that we're going to weigh out for our 3-pound batch of soap. So you think about that, a little bit of lye goes a long way. I mean, at the hardware store, a lot of times it's either in 1 pound. This is a 2-pound container, so this is 32 ounces. And you're making 3 pounds of soap, and you're only using 7 ounces of it. So the lye, I mean, it is a cost up front, but it goes quite a ways. Now, I mentioned it's a powdery substance, but for the soap making process, we actually need to have it as a solution. We've got to dissolve it in water. And so the final calculation is a soap making rule of thumb here. We take our lye amount times 2 to give us the amount of water that we're going to use. So our water amount? 14.2, excellent. So in the kitchen, we will actually weigh out 14.2 ounces of water. We'll weigh out 7.1 ounces of lye. We'll dissolve it there.
Okay.
So that's it. I feel like we should have a round of applause. We survived math on a Saturday morning. The reason we did this, it seems a little tedious, but I want you to see the behind the scenes of what we're doing, because if you want to make soap at home and you're saying, you know, I've got this oil on hand, but not this one. Can I trade it out? You absolutely can, but you've got to rerun your numbers in terms of the amount of lye that you need. You can't just interchange it in your recipe and say, I'm going to plug in this different oil for my sunflower oil. Make sense? Okay, just that, so that is critically important, is that you've got to rerun your numbers. Now, with that being said, there are a number of online lye soap calculators. So a couple of the suppliers, Majestic Mountain Sage has one of the calculators, Brambleberry has another calculator, and so you can plug in the numbers, it runs it for you. Just wanted to give you a little bit of the behind the scenes to see why we're doing what we're doing, but you can definitely use the online version as well. So, questions about what we've done so far? About the numbers? Okay. Bottom part of the page is essential oils. We will return to that later. However, I would recommend you're going to want to keep this page out because taking it with you to weigh out your ingredients will be very useful. Okay, so it's time that we start getting our ingredients weighed out and ready to go to start making some soap. I'll go over a few instructions here before we break up into our groups and get going, because then at that point I'll just kind of be circulating and trying to touch base with all groups. A lot of you have already done this, but if you've got like coats, bags, things like that, I would suggest like on the floor, behind you, or even at the back, just to avoid spills, that type of thing. that would be my recommendation. So beyond that, we're going to be set up. So with your group, you will be making a 30-pound batch together. So the amounts that you weigh out here, for instance, like you three will be weighing out 18 ounces of coconut oil, 15 ounces of soybean, etc. The weigh station that I have set up at the front here is that'll be for our 4 carrier oils. And so I've got the ingredients along with a corresponding scale for each one. So clearly we can even spread these out to make a little bit more space. So we can have different groups at each of these stations weighing out those ingredients. I would recommend for the coconut oil, bring up that big white measuring cup, because the coconut oil is also in kind of a semi-solid form. I can kind of tip it so you can see that. So we're going to actually scoop this one out with a spoon. So I'd recommend that big white container for your coconut oil. And I will have a spoon up here for it. Okay. Soybean oil, next. For that one, I would recommend bringing up your small, like that clear 2-cup or 4-cup measuring cup, sorry. Again, we're not using the cup measurements. We'll actually put it on the scale and weigh it, but that one is good for your soybean oil. For your sunflower oil, I've got the containers up here. We're just going to be weighing that one into these cups. And then for our cocoa butter, we're going to be scooping them just into the bowls here. With each of your ingredients, when you're weighing them out, you will, first of all, put your empty container, we'll power on the scale, then put your empty container on the scale. Each scale is a little bit different, but every single one has a function that either says 0 or tare, T-A-R-E. And what that does is then that takes the weight of that container in consideration. So after you hit tare, then you're just going to weigh out 18 ounces precisely of coconut oil. I love the analogy because my dad came up with this a year or two ago. My dad and mom came down to visit me in Ames, and I did a soap making workshop with them. Like, they've known I've done this forever, and they've helped me build molds and helped me build drying stands, but they had actually never made soap themselves. And so they came down one Sunday and like, we're going to make soap. And so they could see how it was done. And my dad farms up in northern Iowa, and I loved his analogy, is that when we put tare on the scale, he's like, that's your empty wagon at the elevator. Like, yes, exactly, I love it. And then you fill it with your grain. So there you go, tare is your empty wagon. So empty container, hit tare, and then you weigh out the exact amount that's on your page. Quick refresher, because some of these, like for instance, 18 ounces, we got to think about ounce-pound conversions. So that's with the coconut oil, that's going to come into play. So what's 18 ounces when we think in terms of pounds? 1 pound, 2 ounces, yes, definitely. The others are all under that amount, so we're okay, but 1 pound, 2 ounces there. So we got those 4 stations set up here. Lye station will be in the kitchen. And for that portion, we've got several pieces of personal protective equipment that are provided, are not only provided, are required. Because this is a part of the process. Anytime we're making potential contact with the lye, we've got to be really aware of that making contact with our skin. Essentially, we want to minimize any skin contact whatsoever. So long sleeves, clearly, I will pull these down. Long sleeves, legs covered, I know it sounds strange right now because it's winter, but if you're doing this in the summer, closed-toed shoes, no flip-flops, that type of thing. Covered up, and then 3 pieces of personal protective equipment that we need. PPE, gloves. So these are just like the nitrile gloves here. We've got 3 sizes, small, medium, large. Grab whatever works for you. You need eye protection. We don't anticipate having contact, but a splash, for instance, could touch your eyes. You need to have your eyes covered in some form or fashion. So if you're a glasses wearer, that's cool. If you're not, you absolutely must wear safety glasses. Sometimes glasses wearers like to double up just to be super safe. We've also got, you can put these over your glasses. That's totally your choice. But I need everyone's eyes covered in some form or fashion. And then the last piece of personal protective equipment that we need only for the part where we're dissolving the lye is a respirator mask. Because when we actually do the dissolving process, it does create fumes just for a minute or two. And so, precautionary measure, we're going to wear the masks just for that portion. I would suggest that you all come and do it so that you can see what it's like. Generally, there's going to be, because you're going to be weighing things out, and then when you're dissolving the lye, there's a pouring job and a stirring job. So I would suggest everyone still come into the kitchen. We'll just do one group at a time so you can see what it's like. Because if you're doing it at home, let's be real, this is the really scary part, right? That's like, am I going to blow up my house? Like, and yes, you can safely do this in your house. I've done so making in my house for years. The worst thing I've done is like had lye eat away at my cabinet. And again, that was one of those like, oh, learned that the hard way, right? Okay. So let's go through a couple steps for the lye dissolving process. I'm going to grab a couple supplies from the kitchen. I'll talk you through it, and then we'll be ready to rock and roll. In the kitchen, one group at a time, we'll head in there, and that's where we're going to do the preparation for our lye. In the kitchen, first thing is you are going to be weighing out. We've got a scale in there. You need to bring with you your smaller stainless steel container, which should be at each of your tables. So please bring, for the lye portion, if you just want to set these aside now, your small stainless steel container and your red spatula. Yep, you got the right one. So just set those aside. Those are what you're going to bring into the kitchen for that portion. In your stainless steel container, you're going to put that on the scale, hit the tare or zero button, and weigh out our amount of water, which is 14.2 ounces. Yes, beautiful. Then we'll set that aside. I've got containers in there where we're going to weigh out the lye, just like plastic containers here. So we'll set that on the scale. We will carefully pour our lye in there. How much lye? 7.1 ounces. Excellent. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to borrow a prop here. We've got our water in here. We've got our lye in here. We're ready to do the dissolving process. We've got all of our personal protective equipment on. This is the part that I recommend, if you're doing it at home too, do this in the sink, because if something were to spill, for instance, then it's all contained, it's right there, rather than, on your counter, out in the open, etc. Okay, so we've got our water in here, we've got our lye in here. We're going to carefully, in the sink, this is sitting down in there, we're going to carefully pour our lye in. One person can pour, one person can stir. When you start to mix it up, it's going to be like a milky appearance, definitely really milky white. Just keep stirring long enough, a minute or so that it's uniformly mixed. We don't want to see like any chunks or flecks of the lye. Uniformly mixed, and then we're good to go. We're going to actually leave this then sitting in the sink. One thing that's, I think, really cool, I'll just admit up front, this is like a geeky science chemistry moment, but this is when we dissolve our lye, it's a very exothermic process. So, any takers, what's exothermic all about? Heat, yeah. So we're going to start with cold water. In the process of that lye dissolving, it generates incredible amounts of heat. This will get to 180 or 190 degrees. Yeah, it's pretty crazy from cold water. And so we've then got to give this time to cool back down, of course. So I recommend, again, leave it in your sink to cool down. Leave it so it won't be disturbed that way. If you're doing this at home, make sure you label that this is lye, because as it cools, it goes from milky white to totally crystal clear like water. And you would not want someone to mistakenly think you had a pot of water sitting there, like a significant other, spouse, child, etc. So I've got masking tape where I'll have you put your initials in there, but if you're doing it at home, literally like tape on here and write that it's lye, write that it's poison. But that's it. Then we just let it sit there and cool. So I will be circulating as we go. I'll primarily be in the lye area because that's usually the part the folks are just want to make sure we're doing this right. But what questions do you all have before we get started weighing things out?
Can you leave the spatula sitting in the lye as it cools?
Yeah, I would actually recommend doing that because that avoids the set the spatula on my counter, did that one. Burned a hole through my counter. Yeah, I recommend just the silicone spatulas, just leave it sitting there as it cools, then you don't have to worry about it touching other things. Yep, great question, definitely. Another thing you can do with this, if you're doing this at home, to keep the temperature cool, we know we're weighing out 14.2 ounces of water. We're gonna start with cold water. You can actually weigh part of your 14.2 ounces as ice. Weigh about half of it. I mean, you still need to get to 14.2 ounces total, but put in 7 ounces or so of ice, and then the rest is cold water, just because that's gonna help keep that temperature down. It still gets really hot, but you're keeping it a little bit cooler. So, what is lye made from? That's an excellent question. Like traditionally, it was made from wood ash, from trees. I mean, so it was burned down, and that was how the lye was produced. Now it's all produced synthetically. I mean, it's produced in factories, that type of thing. But yeah, it was wood ash was the traditional way that lye was made. So, and that's, I mean, as I think about it, like, how did they know, like how strong the lye was or exactly how much to use? A lot of times you hear that handcrafted soap, like it's harsh. Or, like the soap my grandma made was really harsh. Well, I mean, it might have been because how did they know exactly, like with the lye, if they were if they were literally making, they were making their own lye, they didn't have a scale to weigh it out to 1/10 of an ounce, it might have been harsh. They probably used maybe a lard in it, for instance, because just to make it in the very traditional process. So, but yeah, with the homemade lye, a lot of times, from what I've read, I haven't done it, from what I've read, you're gonna be dissolving the water in it like through the wood ash, and so it's gonna have those it's already, you're not gonna do the dissolving part. It's already gonna have, you're gonna have your water and your lye together. So I can't speak to that. I don't wanna give you false information that's not well informed. So I would encourage, check out, I mean, the internet's a wonderful resource. It's also, it can be an overwhelming resource, but there are a lot of soap blogs out there that I like to follow. I would recommend just checking out online, like if people are making their own lye, reading from their experience, because I don't feel like I'm well qualified to be able to speak to that a lot. But it's an awesome question. If you decide to do it, let me know. I would like to see it. So let's rock and roll. So with your group, your job is to, out here, weigh out 4 carrier oils. In the kitchen, your job is to dissolve your lye. Your 4 carrier oils you're going to be bringing back to your tables here. And then we're going to start out with the 2 that are solid or semi-solid at room temperature, our coconut oil and our cocoa butter. Add those to your big stainless steel pot, and then we're going to start heating those up to get them melted down. 3 groups right here, you're going to be heating you've got the hot plates at your spots. And so just start melting those down. Keep your soybean oil and your sunflower oil just set off to the side for the time being.
Like you want us to just start without you, like wait till you're out here.
You can start without me on that part, heating them up. Yep. Yep, just low heat. That's you can do that. My 2 groups over here, hold off. So you will be heating yours up on the stovetop in the kitchen. So we'll wait on yours until everybody's done with lye, and then we'll start getting yours heated up. You can at least get them added to the big stainless steel pot, and then we'll heat them up once the kitchen is open. And then you'll just be doing a little bit of transferring back and forth between the 2 spots. So, okay. So ladies, let's do this. Do I have any groups? Who's my taker to start out with their lye? Because we gotta have somebody start out first group. Right here. Yes, thank you. Love it. Okay. So right here, you will be my first group to start out with lye. Rest of the groups,
Start measuring.
yep, start measuring. So I just recommend just do 1 oil at a time, take it back to your spots, and we'll be good to go. Okay, I took those from you. So before you all come up to do your lye, make sure you stop at the table and get all of your personal protective equipment, because you will need that before you come into the kitchen. And if you go over, that's just fine. Just dump it down the drain. That's why we're right at the sink here.
Wow, that's creepy.
Did you get it perfectly?
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, I will also grab you. You can take that one actually off the scale. I'm gonna grab, I've got a permanent marker there. I'll give you tape. If you can just put, names or initials, so when we come back later, we'll know whose is whose.
Your turn.
Okay, and then what's our lye amount we're going for?
7.1.
Okay, so there's 3. Nope, it really doesn't. I just brought a couple different ones. That's the ones I order online, and the Robic is one I've bought at Lowe's, just so you can see some of the different brands and what they look like.
Which one would you like, ladies?
Right, let's look at the semi-formal. And so you can see that it has, I mean, when you were opening the cap, it's got almost like the medicine-like cap, which is intentional, yep, because lye is really moisture sensitive to the air. So if you're doing it at home, make sure that when you're done using it, that you get it closed up well, and that, because that keeps moisture out. Otherwise it just gets like clumpy because it takes in the moisture from the air. The lye actually reacts with the fat to form soap molecules. Yep. So it's basically, it's imperative. Like you cannot have soap without lye. Yep. In some point in the process, there has to be lye to actually form the soap molecules. It went over a little bit. So what I would recommend is just carefully, so squeeze your container to make a little bit of a spout, and then just carefully pour it back in. Are you right on? Yay! Okay, I'll jump out there in just a moment. All right, so you are ready now to dissolve it. So I would recommend I just recommend set it in the basin of the sink here. And I'd suggest one pour, one stir. I'm gonna hop out here because we've got a scale issue. I'll be back shortly though. I think you've got the basics. Okay,
This one over here. So which one does it's got, it's like grams or something. Something weird going on here.
Oh, that is definitely gram, is it?
And that's milliliters, and it won't go to ounces.
Huh.
Oh, did we have ours on ounces? Don't know.
That's bizarre.
Okay.
Quantity-wise, it would have.
Should I just do a different scale?
We should have then should have 21 ounces total. So that's true. So you'd need to weigh. We would need to get one of the available scales, zero the container, and then before you put anything in it, and then make sure it adds up to 21 ounces total. How's it going in here, ladies?
I think we're good.
Beautiful. That's exactly what we would expect. It's amazing. So I'd encourage you all, get your hand closer, even touch the container. You feel how hot it is. Yeah, you can feel the heat rising off of it. So it is. Yep. Yeah. So it's just, that's what you're going to expect. Kind of that milky, a little bit of a milky appearance to it. But then we're just going to let that sit there and cool, because our ideal temperature measurement when we actually make the soap, we want all of our ingredients to be in the range of 90 to 115. Clearly it's a lot hotter than that right now. So we just leave it sit there to cool. Just the ones that are solid, semi-solid.
Okay, and they're fine in there.
Together, yep, that's good. Just on low heat. I mean, we don't want those to boil or anything, but we want them to just get melted down to liquid. So you're good to go. Just the coconut oil or cocoa butter, and then just the ones that are solid, semi-solid.
Okay, and they're fine in there.
Together, yep, that's good. So if you're melted down, if you haven't done so yet, you can now add your soybean oil and your sunflower oil, and you can actually take it off the heat now. You should have a little silicone pad that you can set, hot plate that you can set it on. We know the lye got really hot. Our oils, so we had to melt some of them down. Others we just added at room temperature. But our ideal range before we actually start the chemical reaction is that we want all of our soap, or all of our soap ingredients, to be in the range of approximately 90 to 115 degrees. So having a little thermometer is super handy because we can easily check that. And these thermometers they're great. They're digital infrared thermometers. You may have seen bigger ones that, for instance, like electrical contractors will use. It look like a little, kind of like a pistol, like pointed at the, at a surface. So they're non-contact. You can basically, you will hold it an inch or two away from a surface and actually be able to look at the temperature of that, which is great because we want to check the temperature of our oils as well as our lye. If you're using a thermometer that you have to immerse, you're gonna have to wash that every time in between. So I would recommend, obviously our lye is still gonna be very hot, but I would encourage each group, test out your thermometer just so you can get a sense of how it works. And let's take a reading of your temperature of your oils right now just to get a sense of it. Could you do this on your gas stove? Yeah. Could you do this outside? Kayla, can you do this outside?
Yes, absolutely. So fun.
You can. So we actually did this outside with Story County with Wild Women in the Woods. We used camping stoves. So you just need a heat source of some type. You can do it obviously at your kitchen stove as well. So basically we just need to be able to heat it up. We don't really need a ton of heat just to get things so they're melted. We don't need things boiling or anything. So gas or electric, both are good. So groups, basically your mission now is just to keep an eye on temperatures. Some of yours are hot, and that's fine. We're just going to need to give them time, but we've got time. Some of yours are borderline on the low end. We want to be between 90 and 115. So if it's getting cool, we're just going to put it back on the hot plate, give it 5 minutes, and we'll just keep an eye on it. In the meantime, let's talk about the next steps of the process, because we've got a few steps coming up, and then once we start the mixing process, there's no stopping, and there's no me talking over you. So one of the questions that came up while we were looking at, getting lye dissolved and melting the oils down is like, well, I was thinking about adding lavender to my soap. Do we have that option? We do. We actually save that for the end. And so while we're waiting on temperatures here, it's a good chance to talk about essential oils and adding fragrance to your soap. In terms of soap, cosmetics, adding fragrance, there's a few different options. The two main classes of compounds that you could add are either essential oils or fragrance oils. The big difference is that essential oils are extracted totally from plant material, natural, versus fragrance oils, which are synthetic fragrances. They're often created to mimic some of the natural fragrances. There's thousands of options. There's way more possibilities with fragrance oils. So it's totally your choice when you're doing it at home. Today you only get to use essential oils because that's what I use. So I've got at least 20, I think like 24 different essential oils for you all to smell and think about. Keep in mind, you will need, within your group of 3, you will need to come to a consensus in terms of which essential oils you want to use. But I would very much encourage you, I'll get them out here momentarily and give you all a chance to start smelling them and seeing what you think. But it's an awesome chance to just smell essential oils that you don't have. If you're thinking about buying any, it's a good chance to smell them first. Make notes of what you like, what resonates with your nose, or what doesn't. The essential oils are the most expensive part of this process. That's definitely where the most money is. I mean, some of these, they range anywhere, like if we're talking about on a per ounce basis, so they're very, very concentrated, volatile compounds. You smell, you start to smell them right away. Some of them, they range anywhere from like a couple dollars per ounce to anywhere from like 50 to hundreds of dollars per ounce. I don't bring those ones to workshops. I don't even own those ones that are like hundreds of dollars per ounce. But they're very, very concentrated, so we don't actually need to use a ton in our soap. Quick calculation here, you won't need calculators or anything for this part, I promise. But when you're thinking about essential oils or fragrance oils for your soap, the rule of thumb here is that our usage rate is 1/2 ounce of essential oil per pound of carrier oils that we used. 1/2 ounce of essential oil per pound of base oils. So knowing that, what does that tell us about our recipe today? So I heard 1.5 ounces. I would agree with that. So for your 3-pound batch of soap, you use up to 1.5 ounces of essential oil. So not a huge amount, but when you're thinking about obviously like the cost of it, that's definitely where a lot of your money is going to be. With the essential oils, I mentioned they're extracted from plants. So it depends on the different plant where they come from. Citrus oils, for instance, are extracted from the peels of the plant. A lot of them come from the leaves of the plant. Some of them come from the roots of plants, like ginger essential oil comes from the root. But they all go through some sort of either an extraction, or a lot of them it's a steam distillation process. This is the type of stuff that like chemical engineers live for, right? Anyway, we're not going to get into how they're extracted in detail, but basically they all come from the plants in some form or fashion. Smelling essential oils. Because they're really concentrated, I recommend hold it a little ways away from your nose, and you're going to want to like wave it a little bit because that air movement is going to allow the volatile compounds to volatilize, to reach your nose readily. What I discourage is putting it like right up to your nose and taking a really deep breath because that can be a little bit overwhelming. So wave it around, get a good sense of what it's all about. Excellent. There's a ton to smell. At one point, you might feel like they're all starting to blend together. We have coffee beans. So the coffee beans basically help to neutralize our scent palette. So when your nose, if you've smelled 5 or 6, and you're like, okay, I'm overwhelmed here. Smell the coffee beans. Start fresh. Other than that, thinking about your soap recipe, I mentioned up to 1.5 ounces per your 3-pound batch of soap. That can be broken down. If you want to use one essential oil, you can. Or if you want to do a blend of multiple essential oils, you're certainly welcome to do that too. So 1.5 ounces is your total. If you want to do, I would say, if you want to do a 1, if you want to do a blend of 2, if you want to do a blend of 3, that's great. I wouldn't recommend going more than that because then we're starting to get into like weighing out really small quantities. But I'd recommend a blend anywhere from 0 to 3 essential oils as part of your soap. So if I'm thinking about doing 2 essential oils together or 3 together, this is not very scientific, but it's entertaining. So it's like, how do they smell like together? Just hold both bottles together and wave them and see how they smell. How about if, that would be like, oh, I'm going to do an equal amount of these 2. What if I'm thinking, well, I like that combination, but I want to do more of one and less of the other? Hold that one farther away and wave it and see what it smells like, Okay, but when it comes to the point where you've decided what you want to use, then we actually do weigh those out again by weight. We will be using the scales, the balances for those. I'll get them out. I've got little bitty baby beakers that we will be weighing them into. Are those not super cute? Yeah. And so essential oils will, like I said, they will be done by weight, but I would just encourage you. Smell them, see what you like, see what you don't like, see what your group can come to in terms of a consensus. I'd be happy to bounce ideas with you, but I want you to use your nose first in terms of what speaks to you, and then let me know if you've got some favorites. I can definitely bounce ideas, but I'm not going to give you suggestions up front. I want you to explore and see what you come up with. So, exfoliants, a lot of times, kind of the rule of thumb is generally, it varies, but anywhere from, generally starting with 1 teaspoon per pound of oils. And I do have a couple exfoliants here. So actually exfoliants and colorants. So exfoliant options, again, you'll have to figure this out with your group if you all want, basically you've got to decide if you all want to do that or not. I do have oatmeal, I have poppy seeds as well, which can be an exfoliant. And so those can be added and mixed in with your whole batch. In addition, so if you don't add an exfoliant, that's cool, you're going to have a lovely, nice, smooth, silky soap bar. Once they're in their molds, I also have a bunch of other herbal additives that you can sprinkle on the top of your soap. Because a lot of the botanicals and herbal additives, they don't hold their color within the soap itself because the lye, it's going to be reactive for 24 hours. And so they can tend to discolor, turn brown. And so what might look really lovely like on the top of your soap, like little lavender buds, look really sad on the inside of your soap because they turn brown and they look like mouse droppings. So don't do it. Don't go there. Anyway, but I have I've got about half a dozen different botanicals and salts as well that you can, if you want to sprinkle on the top of your soap. Each person can decide on that individual if they want to do that. But it adds a really cool pop of color because then when you cut your soap, each bar will have that on the top. So I do have chamomile flowers, I have calendula petals, I have lavender buds, you can sprinkle the oatmeal and poppy seeds on the top as well. And then I have 3 different salts. I've got Himalayan pink sea salt, a Hawaiian red salt, and a Hawaiian black salt. So really classy, just a little bit of color. Totally your option, each person, if you want to do that or not. Adding the botanicals within the soap itself is kind of the next level of class, and it's always an ongoing trial and error learning process. So for the greatest success, I would very much discourage you from doing that with your first batch of soap. So add it to the top, and everybody will go home happy. All right, so let's go ahead. Keep an eye on your temperatures, but I'll get all the essential oils out so you can start smelling those. And then when you're at a point, like I said, I can bounce ideas if you wish, or if you're at a point to get those weighed out, let me know, I'll get you the beakers. And then we'll all come together, I'll do one more talking session before we start mixing everything. So, okay, ladies, I want to go over a couple more steps here, and then we are at a point where we'll be ready to start mixing. So I checked the temperatures of all of our lye, and this was about 15 minutes ago. We were all between 111 and 131, so 15 minutes have gone by. We should be in excellent shape there. So I just wanted to talk through our remaining steps here, and then we'll get ready to start mixing. Right now, so in front of you, you've got your oils. We will not need the hot plates anymore, but what we will need to do is switch those out, and I'll bring these around to you momentarily here, but we'll be switching them out at each spot for stick blenders, for immersion blenders, because like I mentioned earlier, these are going to be really important for helping us with the mixing. So I want to see serious pioneer woman mixing from all of you. Vigorous mixing. We don't just stand here with a stick blender. So mixing, 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 and the stick blender is mixing at the same time. All the stick blenders have 2 different speeds. I'd recommend when we first mix things together, so we'll be doing this at our spots here, all the mixing will happen in our big stainless steel pot. When we first pour in our lye solution, the ingredients are naturally going to form layers. They're going to separate. So we've got oil and we've got water, right? Our goal is to get them to mix together with our own mixing and with the help of the stick blender. Because like we said at the beginning, we've got to get the oil molecules and the lye molecules bumping into each other because that's what forms soap molecules. Okay, so they're naturally going to separate at the beginning. Then we use our stick blender to start mixing. So 2 speeds, I'd recommend you start on low for about the first 30 seconds until you get things emulsified, till it's pretty uniform throughout. Then you can crank it up to high speed. Now the nice thing is you're working in groups. That means you've got 3 mixers. So there's no excuse for weak mixing because you can all take turns. So with the mixing here, at the very beginning, it's going to be really thin, very liquidy. But as we go, that mixture is gradually going to thicken up. And that's what we'd expect. That's what we want as we're forming this soap batter. We want to get to a point where it's like a pudding or a cake batter-like consistency. And in the soap world, that point is called trace. The reason it's called trace is because if I were to take a spoon or a spatula and trace an S-curve in your batter, will that S-curve, will it stay because of the thickness of that mixture? That's what we're going for. If I did that right now, it's just going to disappear. So that's the thickness. That's a good test if you trace an S-curve. Or if you scoop up a little bit of the mixture, drop it back in, like if it plops back in, will it sit on the surface for a second before it sinks back in? That's the consistency we're looking for. How long does that take? It depends on the vigor of your mixing. It depends on your mixer. I'll be honest, some of the mixtures are more powerful than others, and with the more powerful mixers, it tends to go a little bit faster. But generally, 10 to 15 minutes or so of mixing. How about if you feel like our stick blender is getting a little hot? What I'd recommend then is run it for about 30 seconds and then leave it off for 30 seconds, but just stir by hand. So you're kind of running it in spurts rather than running it constantly. Because we're running these things pretty hard, right? I mean, but it's only for a short time. So what I'd recommend, if it's feeling like it's getting warm, just switch it off. Stir by hand for 30 seconds and then stir with the mixer for 30 seconds. Now, when we get to the point of trace, that's when we add our essential oils. So your essential oils need to stay off to the side in their little baby beaker until the very end. The reason for that is because in the soap making process, we want the lye to be reacting with our base oils, with our coconut oil, our soybean oil, our sunflower oil, our cocoa butter. We don't want the lye to eat up our essential oils. We want to wait till the very end so we can maximize the amount of that awesome scent and the benefits of those essential oils that come through in our final soap product. So when you get to trace, I'll be circulating, but when you think you're at trace, you're gonna find me, you're gonna holler at me, somehow, get my attention, I'll come check it out and verify that you're at trace. Or I may tell you you're at an early trace, let's mix for another 30 seconds or another minute. When I give you the go-ahead, then you'll add your essential oils into the big pot. Mix for 30 to 60 seconds more. It can be on high speed. Again, we want to make sure that they are uniformly mixed throughout the whole thing. At that point, then, we are ready to pour our soap into its mold. For our molds here today, we are using food storage containers, which are super handy because it works out readily that with your 3 pounds of soap, 1 pound fits really nicely in each of these. So you'll each get to go home with your own separate batch in here. At home, there's a ton of different options. You can use something like this, certainly. You can also look on the internet and spend epic amounts of money on fancy soap molds and everything in between. In terms of molds, there are fancy, like there are wooden log molds. Those you need to line with some like wax paper, parchment paper of some sort. Use a heavy, sturdy box, like a heavy-duty shoebox. Line that. Same principle. You can definitely do that at home without having to spend a ton of money on molds. Silicone molds are your friend. So think about different like little silicone bread molds, for instance. Those could work great for soap. I've got a couple others. I brought a silicone soap mold to show. This one is intentionally for soap, but you can see, it's just round cavities here. Silicone muffin tins, for instance, would certainly work. How about a milk carton? When you're done, just peel the milk carton off. Pringles can. Again, peel it off when you're done. You'd have a round soap, and then you can cut it vertically and have your slices there. So there's lots of options. You can spend all kinds of money. But for today, this is a really nice option for you to be able to easily take it home. Once you get your soap made, so what I'd recommend, line up all 3 of your molds, pour it as best as you can evenly between the 3. Use your spoons, use your spatulas to get as much of that soap as you can out of your pot. It's all good soap, so we don't want to leave it in the pot. Might as well get it in here to take home. At this point, what do we need for personal protective equipment? Yep, glasses, so eyes protected again, and then gloves. So masks not needed for this sport, but we still need to have our eyes, and basically we still want our skin to be protected because that lye remains reactive for 24 hours. Once your soap is in its mold, you're gonna wrap it up in your towel, your blanket, keep it bundled up in a little papoose for 24 hours because that reaction is gonna keep proceeding for that amount of time. So we wanna hold that heat in so it can continue according to plan. After 24 hours, then is the time when you can unmold it. And I'll be honest, they're hard to get out of here. It's not easy. You might wreck the container. Just heads up, that might happen. So don't be disappointed if your container is not reusable. People sometimes find it helps to pop this in the freezer for like 15 or 30 minutes before you plan to unmold it because it helps like loosen it up a little bit. But basically, use a kitchen knife of some sort. You're gonna kind of cut around the edges as best you can. Cut it into bars however you want, your choice. If you want to do big bars, if you want to do little bitty guest bars, your choice. Then at that point, find a nice peaceful spot in your house where your soap can cure because then it needs 4 weeks of cure time before you use it. So patience is a virtue. We make it now, but you don't get to enjoy it until late February. But it's worth it. That patience time, that curing time is really important because that's when the extra water evaporates out of your soap and allows that to form into a really awesome, hard soap bar. Technically, you could use it after the 24 hours is up. Is it gonna be an awesome soap then? No, because to me at that point, it's gonna be pretty soft, a little mushy. Water's gonna eat away at it really quickly. So honor those 4 weeks, give it its time. What I recommend for that, somewhere where it won't be disturbed, if you've got a spare bedroom, if you got just a space like up on a shelf, I'd even put it like above a refrigerator, just so you're not bothering it a lot. It just needs air circulation. So I've used a cookie sheet, a jelly roll pan, lay out wax paper, and then just stand up the bars so air can circulate around them. Then I can easily pick it up, and if I need to move it somewhere else too, you can do that. Then at that point, 4 weeks are passed, it's yours to use. So there's no harm in it curing longer than that. It can certainly stay. You just want to make sure it's out in the open air circulation. Or you can package it up and start using it, or you can give it as gifts, whatever you want to do. Social media, at Siberian Soap, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So we'd love to see your final soaps. Follow along. Let's be friends. Beautiful, that looks awesome, yes. Definitely add your essential oils, 30 to 60 seconds of mixing, and then let's get your molds lined up, yep. Yeah, that looks awesome. Very, very good. So I'd maybe stop there and then fill the others, and then you can top them all off.
Thank you.